I'm delighted to welcome Eliza. She's been a frequent presenter at these series of conferences. She is the CEO and co-founder of th4ts3cur1ty and Pocket SIEM. And her presentation title is "It's common knowledge among senior leadership teams that a large proportion of the expensive products and services we buy today serve very little or no value in the context of our business." Fascinating title.
That's not
Brave
the title.
to stand up and talk in that way. Eliza, welcome.
Thank you so much. So that's actually not the title or the name of my business, but thank you. Okay, so I hope no one minds that I'm going to have a beer. I know it's morning, but it is a breakfast beer. And I think when you're talking to this many people, when you've not done it since 2019, you're kind of allowed. So I'm a little bit nervous, so I do apologise if I swear or fall over, die of a heart attack. One of my colleagues actually said to me yesterday, "Don't worry, just imagine everybody naked." So can I just ask that you two gentlemen and you over there just get out, just for 10 minutes? I didn't mean it. I'm sure your wives think you're lovely. Okay. So, can everyone hear me okay? Do I have to do this, or is it all right if I do this? Just a bit more casual. Okay, lovely. So, my actual company name is That Security Company. You can see it in the bottom. And then Pocket SIEM is a subsidiary of that. So it's just something else that we do. So my talk title is actually Cybersecurity Stockholm Syndrome. Very controversial. How to take back the reins of your cyber defense through open source technologies. So I do realise there's a shit ton of vendors in here, and they're all going to be thinking, what a cunt. And that's absolutely fine. So I've put a picture of a lead balloon on there just because this talk's probably going to go down like a lead balloon. I would normally say this is going to go down like a shit sandwich, but I really did not think that that would go very well as an image, especially before dinner anyway. So I just want to start off by talking about what Stockholm Syndrome is. So Stockholm Syndrome, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a psychologist. I'm sure if I was, I'd have been arrested years ago for spouting nonsense. But anyway, so Stockholm Syndrome started in 1973, where this guy that looks suspiciously like that girl from Carrie, I don't know if anyone else is thinking the same thing, he went and held up a bank in Stockholm, Sweden, and he was a complete, psycho, like massive psychopath. He kept them there for days, and he took hostages, and he threatened them and everything. But then when he released the victims, his hostages, none of them wanted to press charges against him, and they all wanted to be his friend, and they talked about how much they really liked him and felt sorry for him, which is really weird. So I find that all particularly interesting. That's his name. I'm not going to butcher it, but I think it sounds like a shop, Klaus Olsen or something. So, okay, for Stockholm Syndrome to actually take effect, there's 4 things that we know of through qualified psychiatrists that have identified this. In order for it to take hold, they have to, the victim has to be able to feel threatened. So their life has to be at risk, and they strongly believe they're going to die. I will get to cybersecurity in a minute, I promise. The abuser must show a very small act of kindness after a prolonged period of no kindness. So if any of you have got a dog, I've got a dog, absolute nightmare. She'll scratch me, she'll jump at me, but then as soon as she rolls over and says, "Pat my belly," I'm like, oh, she's adorable. And she's actually quite evil. So the victim must also be isolated from third-party perspective. So they're so wrapped up in this that small act of kindness is like, wow, this person's not all bad. And the victim almost must also feel like they cannot escape. And even the most basic attempt to try and escape, or the most outlandish attempt, is absolutely futile. Do you like the little guy there? No? Okay, just me. So how this links to cybersecurity. Okay, so as I was saying, point 1, the victim must feel threatened. So companies now, cyber attacks are imminent, they're told. They're told, you're going to lose all your money, you're going to lose your reputation if you don't get our tool, if you don't buy our services. All this absolute crap, and therefore companies can just charge whatever the fuck they want. So there's a lot of fear selling, and there's the imminent presence of cyber attacks. They see it in the news, it's a massive deal, blah, blah, blah. So the abuser must show a small act of kindness after a prolonged period of no kindness. Now, I don't know if there's any CISOs in the room, IT directors, CTOs. Sorry, I'm absolutely boiling up here. I don't know if it's nerves or hypertension. I have no idea. So if there's any CISOs or decision makers in the room, you probably have call after call after call. They almost feel quite aggressive sometimes. Maybe you've had a company that's got a great reputation and they absolutely do you over. And we're going to go into some horror stories in a minute that are true ones that you probably won't believe. But then once they say, okay, I'm going to wiggle the price for you guys, or I'm just going to knock this down just a little bit, I'm going to throw this little extra bit in for you, I'm doing you a favour, and you're paying me £250,000 for the, for the privilege of me screwing you over. That can be seen as a small act of kindness after maybe a career-long, distinct, evidenced path of absolutely no kindness in the industry at all, and yet it's the CISO's head that's on the chopping block, despite the fact that the majority of the time they're not actually on the board. So cybersecurity is an echo chamber, which we all know, regardless of whether you're on Twitter, LinkedIn, a conference like this, we seem to stick amongst ourselves. The people that are in IT or developers that come to these things tend to have an interest in cybersecurity, so they almost become part of that echo chamber as well. And there's where it comes into not having access to that third-party perspective as well. And the victims must feel like they are unable to escape. And let's face it, you can't. So you're strangled by regulation and you're also strangled by fear. And regardless of what company you go with, if your business that you work in is dependent to survive upon regulation and passing audits, then you are strangled by it. Okay. I really love clowns. And I actually collect vintage clowns that are creepy, and I like to think that they've got dead souls in them. So I hide them around the house if I've ever got anyone over. I actually had someone stay over once, yes, yay me, and had clowns all over when this person woke up and didn't see him again. Anyway, so some horror stories that I've heard over the past 12 months. Now, bear in mind, I'm a startup. My business is a startup. And all of our customers have come from large vendors, and they've been really badly burnt. And they've told us so many horror stories, and some of it's quite hilarious. So we recently come across one of our customers. One of their other vendors had charged them to check for the presence of Log4j vulnerability. And then in order to mitigate against it, they wanted to charge them again. So they'd already paid, I think it was £200,000 to this vendor, and then they ended up paying thousands more, I don't know how much it was, for them to check a vulnerability that was on their side, which is absolutely abhorrent. And if you work for a company that did that, your company's scum, sorry. So charging for training of the tools that you just paid for. So I don't know about you, but if I bought a microwave, I would not want to have to pay extra for the manual. I just wouldn't. So with my company, it's thrown in. So we just provide free training because we think if we've sold you a SIEM or vulnerability management and you don't know how to use it, we've not effectively handed it over. I don't know why that's not more of a thing. I've worked at so many companies. I know I sound like I'm having a bit of a rant, and I am, I suppose, but I think someone needs to. So I've worked at a number of companies where I've been on vendor training, and it's cost like £4,000 per head, and there's been 6 of us on that training. And I think that's a bit ridiculous, especially when the company's just paid an absolute shit ton of money to get that implemented. So there was another company. I'm sure so many of you have heard of this story because it did the rounds last year. There was an MSSP, large one, in the UK. I won't be too specific because you'll get it. They had a glorified log aggregator. We all know the name. Sounds kind of rude, but it's not. Now, this MSSP that was managing that relationship, they were supposed to create dashboards. Because let's face it, if you've got a log aggregator, great. But if you want to use that in a security context, you need to manipulate that data. So you need to be able to create dashboards. So this MSSP, we're going to do that. So this isn't the fault of of that tool, and the company with the rude name that has that tool, it's not their fault at all, it's the MSSP's fault. So the MSSP just didn't create the dashboards. This particular company that was the recipient strongly believed we've got a SIEM, we've got a 24/7 SOC, and there was no dashboards. There was absolutely nobody looking at it for 6 months, and they didn't realise for 6 months. They didn't get any money back, and they still had to keep paying, and they were stuck in a contract with them for 2 years. What a pile of crap. So the last one, and this is one of the latest ones I come across, a very large company, one of the big four, went to a Canadian law firm, and oh god, this one just makes me want to scream. So they went to deploy a SIEM. They were charging $50,000 approximately per quarter. This is what I'm told by the CISO that's at this company. Someone just went, that's troop, on the back over there. Yeah. So they were paying $50,000 per quarter, and they paid $30,000 for the deployment of the SIEM. So $30,000 for the deployment. So deployment being the operative word. Anyway, this CISO goes in, first day, let me see the SIEM. You can't see it because we've got an external company that manages it. Right, okay, but where's it hosted? Oh, it's actually in our server room. So he was like, well, great, I want to go and have a look at it then. So they took him into the server room. It wasn't fucking plugged in. He paid $30,000 for this to be deployed, installed. It wasn't plugged in. I'm just absolutely astounded. So this is my message to you guys. I thought that I'd get a laugh. I showed this to so that's, for anyone that doesn't know, that's our logo. So at least we will turn you on. I mean, we really will. In terms of SIEM, obviously, not in a weird sexual way. My colleague Kimberly saw that for the first time, and she was like, oh, I think the lips are just too realistic and too sexual for me to look at. Made my day, that did. Okay, so aside from those horror stories, there's some common threads that I'm sure we all know about. So the cost of cybersecurity is high, and the benefits are intangible. So I can completely understand the predicament that us as vendors are in, because my company's a vendor as well. So it's hard to justify spend when you're a CISO or you're an IT director, and equally it's hard to try and sell because you're trying to sell something that they can't hold in their hand. But aside from that, there's some outstanding issues that I think we need to squash in the industry, and I think that's going to make the whole industry healthier. So this is kind of sales advice, I guess, to competitors. I don't know, maybe you think it's just a kick in the groin. Take it as you will, but this is the talk that I'm giving, fuck it. So a lack of business context in the SOC. So I don't know, I love this GIF, by the way, it's so cool. So a lack of business context in the SOC. Has anyone worked in the SOC before? Yeah, okay. So you might have like 30 customers and 15-minute SLA, and you sat there with like a bank throwing logs at you, and it's all multi-tenancy, and then you've got like a retail shop, a government sector, a school, blah, blah, blah. And these companies might have all paid for 24/7 SOC, but you can only dedicate like 15 minutes a day, or 7, you might only get 7 minutes depending on how many alerts they get. And it becomes absolute crap because you'll get an IP address, so you don't have much time to triage it, so you end up just forwarding it back onto the customer. They've paid £250,000 for some junior analyst to say to them, hey, this IP looks dodgy, maybe you should do something about it. Okay, that sounds great. Poor customer service. So has anyone ever been with a really, really expensive tool? I mean, I have. And they don't talk to you until it comes time for renewal, and then they're just all over you. I saw some heads nodding there. Some people get it. Some people are going, what the fuck is this woman talking about? So they're expensive. So I don't really think that it's ethical or appropriate in a lot of cases to spend upwards of £100,000 looking at your own logs. I think it's a bit dead money, to be honest. Log aggregators and user behavioural analytics being sold as SIEM. I just don't think that's on. I think it's completely mis-selling. So there is some really big log aggregators out of there, and they absolutely smash the floor. They smash everything when it comes to log aggregators. Like, they are the best, but they're not SIEM. Unless you buy an extra plugin, of course, which costs you another arm and another leg. Now you're a quadriplegic. Thanks. So poor remediation guidance. when you're doing penetration tests and vulnerability management as well. So I don't know if any of you have ever got a pen test report. We all know that's a massive problem when it just says remediation. Here's a link. Great, thanks for that. So why are you tolerating this? And I think a bigger question is, why are you moaning to me about this and then wearing their t-shirts? And I genuinely am quite confused. The amount of love some of these companies get when they're so mistreating of their customers and their prospects, their potential customers. I think it's quite concerning, which made me start thinking about Stockholm Syndrome. So I just want to clear a few things up. So going back to the 4 points of Stockholm Syndrome. So cyber attacks and fear selling, so imminent threat. Well, Sony, Target, Yahoo, Aon, and EasyJet, they're not poor companies. They've got loads of money, and yet they were still compromised. So the amount you spend does not directly correlate to how secure you are, and that's a misconception. So discounts and limited offers. So if you say to a company, look, we'll just knock $5,000 off, maybe, just maybe, your tool or your service should have been $5,000 cheaper in the first place. I don't know about you, but I think if someone just instantly just knocks off a load of cash for me, I kind of think, are they playing me? So cybersecurity is an echo chamber. Yes, that's indeed true. But that's great, actually, and you should totally use that to your advantage. So if you are a decision maker and you are getting bad service, make it known. You don't have to go and name and shame, but in your own circles, make it known. And companies are strangled by fear and regulation, but that is going to be exactly the same regardless of how much you pay. So what can we do about it? We can go open source, okay? So I think there's like a bit of a dichotomy between the budget that we spend on defense versus the budget we spend on licensing, and they're not one and the same things. So everything you can see on here is open source. So if you're one of those companies that thinks, oh, I don't really know if I want to use open source, it seems a bit risky. Well, if your company is using Linux in any capacity, which I guarantee they probably are, you're already using open source. If they're using Docker or Kubernetes, I guarantee you're using open source. If the MITRE ATT&CK framework rings any bells, Kibana, Logstash, Elasticsearch, Suricata, any of these things, you probably are using open source. Okay, so all of these things, SIEM, EDR, log aggregation, SOAR, vulnerability management, IDS, IPS, case management, digital forensics and incident response, and offensive security as well, there's an open source option. Now, open source isn't all fantastic. Some are crap, just like some commercial tools are crap. So you have to be careful. But the ones on here are all incredibly verified and pretty cool. Okay, so some common misconceptions about open source. So open source is free if you don't value your time. I think that's something a lot of people think, and I totally get it. But I think that was fair to say about 15 years ago. Now, not so much. There isn't tools where you can just plug and play. There isn't a SIEM you can just download and plug and play. It just doesn't exist. It requires some time and resource investment, and it's the same with open source. Sorry, I was really nearly burped, then I had to hold it in. I'm so sorry. I look so classy, and it's just so northern. It's crazy. Okay, it's only for small businesses. Absolutely not true. If any of you have ever come across any of these and any of your businesses, I can guarantee open source. Every single company uses open source pretty much in some capacity. So open source is risky. Okay, I get the question, but I really don't believe it. So let's say you are a commercial company and you've got your own tool and you've got a team of 20 developers that are working on that. That's great. But the open source community that's looking after a particular product, there might be thousands of them or millions of them, and they're constantly acting as a feedback loop of penetration testing, in a sense, validating code, making sure updates are going out, making sure the community knows about it. So there's a lot of community support as well. And all of the major open source products that I've listed here, they've all got commercial entities behind them that back them up. You tend to just have to pay for the service, and it never tends to be as much as a commercial tool. So SolarWinds, for example, they're a commercial tool. Security Onion and Elk, Elastic, open source. So there's no support is another misconception. There is, like I said, they're nearly all commercially backed, and that's just something you've got to check. You've got to do your background research on that. And also, there are companies like PocketSeam that provide, they exist to provide support around open source products. And that's me done. And I'm assuming I'm going to get some tomatoes thrown at me, which is fine because I'm not allergic, so go ahead. I'm done. If anyone got any questions?
We've got time for a couple of questions from what I regard as a thought-provoking presentation.
What would you say is the biggest example of security theatre that you see a lot?
Security theatre?
Yes.
I'm not going to name drop, but oh god, I'm not. Do you mean like who's the Theranos of cybersecurity?
Well, I mean in terms of like, the TSA of cyber, there to make you feel protected but not actually protected.
I can't say that. I think UBA. I think user behavioural analytics probably. So user behavioural analytics is amazing, and from a mathematical standpoint, really, really impressive. And I think if you've got everything else going good, and you just need that sort of, you are really concerned about APTs, and you just want, to just have that thin layer of added, I can sleep at night. Maybe you want to go with user behavioural analytics, but I don't like it. So I used to be a user behavioural analytics subject matter expert at a MSSP. That doesn't really mean anything, let's be honest. But, if John swipes in on a Monday at 9 o'clock, he swipes in on a Monday at 9 o'clock, he swipes in on a Wednesday at 5 minutes past 9, he's going to be detected as an insider threat, and there's going to be red alerts everywhere. Nobody cares. If everything else is working great, which I guarantee it's not in the majority of places, then UBA would be good. But I don't back it. I don't think we're ready for like AI and stuff like that yet. I don't think it's comprehensive enough at this point.
Eliza, would you agree with me that...
Probably not.
She does it every conference. Would you agree with me that it's very, very costly to defend? And
No.
It doesn't cost very much to attack. But to get those defensive costs down, it's about having a proper risk management assessment of your assets, your networks, to put in place the security that your system needs, and not security that's got hundreds of bells and whistles that you're paying thousands of pounds.
Yeah, I guess so. So a lot of attackers use open source products, right? And we're pigeonholing ourselves into commercial products only. In a lot of companies aren't, and open source is definitely definitely coming back to the forefront. But yeah, I think if you have a strategy that you can define, and I think doing something like an internal maturity assessment with like the CIS controls, something along those lines, and using that to define your strategy and highlighting what exactly you need, where you need it, and when you need it by, that's going to be a route to not wasting money and not wasting resources. But I think when you get these companies, this is pointless now, isn't it? When you get these companies that just spend, and they have all these tools that they're not necessarily utilising, in fact, they're underutilising them, it's expensive and they're no more secure.
Yeah. One more question from the audience, please.
Does everyone hate me?
You're all stunned.
Everyone hate me?
Okay.
No.
We'll then call the session to the end. Eliza, many thanks again. Good to see you.
Yes,
and thanks for being provocative again.
This is
How is diversity going? How is your work in bringing more ladies into the profession?
Yeah, good. They are thriving, not just surviving, as Meghan fucking Markle would say.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eliza. Thank you.